Welcome back to Zarila HOA Stories. Drop your country or city name in comment. Chapter 1. The Watchful Eyes. David pressed his palm against the hood of his car, the familiar warmth steadying him after a long day at work. The old sedan wasn't flashy, but it was reliable. He had bought it with his first paycheck years ago, and he kept it clean. Parked neatly in his own driveway, it was his pride. The neighborhood was quiet, almost too quiet. Rows of trimmed hedges, lawns cut to perfection, mailboxes aligned like soldiers. It looked peaceful, but something about it felt heavy, like every step was being observed. David turned toward his house, keys jingling in his hand. Then he froze. Across the street, Linda stood still on the sidewalk, arms crossed, clipboard clutched tight against her chest. She wore her usual pale blue blouse and sharp glasses, eyes locked on his car. Her lips pressed thin, not a smile in sight. David gave her a polite nod. "Evening," he called out. She didn't answer. Instead, she scribbled something down on her clipboard. Her pen scratched fast and hard, like she was cutting into the paper. David frowned. He had seen her doing that before, watching, writing, muttering under her breath. At first, he thought she was making grocery lists, but the way her eyes narrowed at him, at his driveway, at his car, it wasn't groceries she was writing. He stepped closer. "Is there a problem?" Linda finally spoke, her voice sharp as glass. "I keep track of everything here. Rules are rules. Standards must be maintained." David blinked. "I don't follow." She tilted her head toward his car. "That." David glanced back at the sedan. The silver paint was a little faded, but the body was intact. No dents, no rust, nothing illegal. "What about it?" "Unsightly," she said flatly. "We don't allow eyesores in this neighborhood." David let out a small laugh, thinking maybe she was joking. But Linda's expression didn't change. She just wrote another line on her clipboard. "I just park in my own driveway," David said firmly. Linda smiled then, but it wasn't kind. It was thin, cold. "In my neighborhood, I decide what belongs." David stiffened. "Your neighborhood?" "I'm the HOA president. That means I protect the beauty of this place. If one person lowers the standards, the whole street suffers. And I don't allow that." For a moment, neither of them moved. David's chest tightened. He glanced toward the other houses. Curtains shifted. Shadows moved. His neighbors were watching from their windows, but none of them came outside. None of them spoke. It felt like he had stepped into a stage where everyone already knew the script, except him. Linda lowered her pen. "You'll be hearing from me soon." Then she turned and walked away, heels clicking on the pavement, her clipboard tucked under her arm like a weapon. David stood in his driveway, anger rising in his throat. He wanted to yell after her, but the silence of the street pressed down on him. It was the kind of silence that said, "Don't fight her. Don't make it worse." But David wasn't like that. He wasn't going to bow his head to someone who thought she owned him. He looked back at his car, then at the dark windows across the street where neighbors hid behind their curtains. His jaw tightened. He whispered to himself, "She's not touching my car." But deep inside, unease gnawed at him. Because the way Linda had looked at him, like she had already won, made him feel like this was just the beginning. And he was right. That night, as he closed his front door, he saw the corner of an envelope sticking out of his mailbox. No stamp, no return address. Just plain white. His heart thudded as he pulled it free. The paper inside carried only 7 words, written in neat, sharp ink. "Comply, or consequences will follow." David's hands shook. The house felt colder. The street outside seemed to hold its breath. And in the distance, through his front window, he saw her again. Linda, standing beneath the streetlight, watching his house like a hawk. Chapter 2. The warning knock. The morning sun filtered weakly through the blinds when David heard it. 3 sharp knocks on the front door. Not friendly knocks. Hard, deliberate, echoing through the quiet house. His wife looked up from her coffee. "Who is that so early?" David already knew. A sinking heaviness filled his chest. He set down his mug, walked to the door, and opened it. Linda stood there. Clipboard in one hand, a folded paper in the other. Her posture was stiff, her eyes cold. "Good morning," David said, voice tight. Linda didn't smile. "I told you. Standards must be enforced." She thrust the paper into his hands. It was another letter, this one with the HOA seal at the top. He read quickly. Violation notice. Unsightly vehicle. Fine, $500. Failure to pay will result in further action. David looked up, stunned. "You're fining me for my car?" "It lowers property value," Linda said matter-of-factly. "This neighborhood has a reputation. We keep it clean. We keep it proper." "My car is clean," David snapped. "Registered. Legal. It's in my own driveway." Her lips curled into a smile that wasn't really a smile. "You don't understand how this works. I run the HOA. That means I decide what's acceptable. And if you don't listen, you'll regret it." David's fists clenched around the letter. "You can't just make up rules." Linda tilted her head. "You think the board will side with you?" "They won't. They trust me. They always do." The words sank like ice into his stomach. Across the street, a curtain shifted. A neighbor's silhouette vanished back into the dark of their house. Watching again. Always watching, never helping. "Pay the fine," Linda continued, "or the board will authorize removal of the problem." David's jaw tightened. "Removal? Are you threatening to tow my car?" Linda leaned in close, her voice a whisper sharp as a knife. "I don't threaten. I act." The silence after her words felt heavier than the letter in his hand. David could feel his heartbeat in his ears. His wife appeared behind him, her voice trembling. "This is harassment." Linda straightened, ignoring her. 7 days, she said coldly. "No payment, no compliance, then consequences." Without waiting for a response, she turned and walked down the path, her heels tapping against the pavement. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. David stood in the doorway, staring at the letter. His hands shook with anger. "I'm not paying this," he muttered. His wife placed a hand on his arm. "Don't let her bait you. We need to be careful." But careful wasn't what he felt. Careful wasn't what this moment demanded. He crumpled the letter in his fist and threw it onto the counter. Through the blinds, he saw Linda again, already across the street, standing at her porch. Watching. Her eyes didn't leave his house. Not for a second. David whispered to himself, voice rough with rage. "She wants a fight? She'll get one." But as he said it, a thought struck him, something she had said. "The board will side with me." What if she was right? What if this wasn't just Linda? What if the neighbors hiding behind their curtains weren't afraid, but complicit? That night, long after the street fell quiet, David checked his mailbox again. Another envelope waited. Same plain white, no stamp. Inside, just one line. "She always wins." His breath caught. He spun, scanning the shadows of the street. The mailboxes stood in a row, the street lights flickering faintly. Empty. Silent. But he knew. Someone else had written that note. Someone in this neighborhood wanted him to fail. And the worst part? They might be closer than he thought. Chapter 3. The First Strike. The week dragged on like a storm building in slow motion. David tried to ignore it. He went to work, came home, parked his car neatly in the driveway as always. But every time he stepped outside, he saw her. Linda. Clipboard in hand. Eyes locked on him. On his car. On his house. The neighbors pretended not to see. They mowed their lawns, watered their flowers, but their glances slid past him like he didn't exist. Only at night did he catch their silhouettes, standing behind curtains, watching his war with the HOA president unfold. On the 7th day it came. David opened his mailbox, and there it was, an official envelope, sealed with the HOA crest. His stomach twisted as he tore it open. Final notice of fine. $500. Failure to pay will result in forced compliance, including vehicle removal. His blood boiled. He stormed back into the house and slapped the letter onto the table. "Look at this," he said to his wife, voice shaking. She read it quickly, her face pale. "They're serious." "It's my driveway," David growled. "My property. She can't do this." His wife placed a trembling hand on his arm. "David, what if she actually tries?" Before he could answer, there was another knock at the door. Sharp. Heavy. He swung it open. Linda stood there, arms crossed. Two other HOA board members flanked her, an older man with a stiff posture and a woman who wouldn't meet his eyes. Linda's smile was thin. "You've had your notice. Your time is up." David's chest tightened. "I'm not paying your made-up fine." The older man cleared his throat nervously. "It's in the bylaws." David cut him off, slamming the letter against his chest. "Show me where it says my car isn't allowed." "Show me." The man hesitated, eyes darting to Linda. She didn't flinch. "You don't understand," Linda said smoothly. "It doesn't matter what the paper says. The board follows my lead. If I say it's unsightly, it's unsightly." "That's not law," David shouted. Linda leaned closer, her voice low and sharp. "It doesn't have to be. In this neighborhood, my word is enough." For a moment, no one spoke. The silence pressed down on them. Then Linda stepped back, her heels clicking against the pavement. "Next time," she said coldly, "it won't be a letter. It'll be a tow truck." She turned and walked away, her two shadows following. The door closed behind them, but their presence lingered like smoke. David stood there, shaking with anger. His wife whispered, "She means it." "I won't let her touch my car," he said. His voice was steady, but his hands trembled. That night, David sat by the window, staring at his driveway. His car gleamed under the streetlight. Safe for now. But sometime past midnight, he heard it. A low rumble. Heavy chains clinking in the dark. He pulled the curtain aside, and his heart lurched. A tow truck had pulled into his driveway. Its lights off, its engine grumbling like a predator. And there, standing beside it, clipboard in hand, was Linda. Chapter 4. The Midnight Tow. The rumble of the truck shook the windows. David's pulse quickened as he shoved his feet into his shoes and rushed outside. The night was cool, the street quiet except for the growl of the engine. The tow truck squatted in his driveway, metal chains clattering as the driver lowered the hook toward his sedan. "Hey!" David shouted. His voice cracked through the silence like a gunshot. The tow driver looked up, startled, but didn't stop. "Orders from the HOA," he muttered. "Cars being removed." David sprinted across the driveway and planted himself between the car and the truck. His chest heaved, his fists clenched. "You're not touching it." The driver hesitated. "Sir, I'm just doing my job." Behind him, a voice slid through the dark like a blade. "No, you're doing my job." Linda stepped forward from the shadows, clipboard clutched in her hand, her glasses gleaming in the streetlight. Her lips curled in that cold, familiar smile. "I warned you," she said calmly. 7 days. No compliance. Now we enforce." David's rage surged. "You can't tow a car off private property without a court order." Linda tilted her head, unbothered. "This is HOA property. This is my driveway." David roared. The tow driver shifted nervously. "Ma'am, maybe we should." "Do it," Linda snapped. "Hook it up." The driver swallowed hard, stepping toward the sedan. David spread his arms wide, blocking the car with his body. "Touch it and I'll call the police." For the first time, Linda's smile faltered. Her eyes narrowed. "Then call them. Let's see whose side they take." Across the street, porch lights flicked on. Curtains twitched. Neighbors appeared in shadows, peeking out, phones in their hands. Watching. Always watching. The tow driver froze, caught between orders and the man in front of him. His hands trembled on the chain. "Sir, please move." "No," David growled. "This is theft." Silence thickened. The only sounds were the truck's engine and the quickening beat of David's heart. Finally, Linda snapped her fingers. Fine. If he won't move, I'll get him moved. She pulled out her phone, her voice sharp as she spoke into it. Yes, police. Now. The words sent a chill through David's chest. The driver backed away slowly, muttering, I don't want trouble. Linda ignored him. She stared at David, her expression smug once again. You're finished. When the cops arrive, you'll learn what happens when you defy the HOA. David didn't move. He stood planted in front of his car, sweat running down his neck, his whole body rigid with fury. The tow truck idled, the chains swaying like steel snakes waiting to strike. In the distance, faint but growing, came the wail of sirens. The neighbors shifted, their whispers carrying through the night. Some sounded nervous, some almost gleeful. Linda's smile widened. Here they come, she said softly. And when they get here, I'll make sure they drag you away. David's breath came fast and shallow. He wasn't afraid of the truth, but he knew the truth didn't always matter. Not when people like Linda controlled the story. The blue and red lights flashed at the end of the street, painting the houses in colors of fire and blood. The police were almost here. Chapter 5. The police lights. The sirens grew louder, cutting through the night until the flashing lights spilled across the street. 2 squad cars rolled up, their headlights slicing the darkness. Neighbors stepped out of their houses, phones raised high. The street looked like a stage, and David was trapped in the center. He stayed in front of his car, arms crossed, refusing to move. The tow truck driver killed the engine, stepping back with uneasy eyes. He wanted no part of this anymore. The police doors opened. 2 officers stepped out, hands on their belt. Their flashlights swept the scene. Linda wasted no time. She strode forward, her clipboard clutched like a shield. Officers! Thank God you're here. This man is obstructing HOA enforcement. He's hostile, aggressive. I demand you remove him. Her voice carried, sharp and commanding, like she had already won. The taller officer raised a hand. Ma'am, slow down. What's the situation? Linda gestured at David. He refuses to comply with community regulations. His car is a violation. We ordered a tow, but he's blocking it. He needs to be removed so the truck can do its job. David stepped forward, voice steady but tight. This is my car. It's legally registered, parked in my own driveway. She has no authority to tow it. None. The officer turned to Linda. Do you have a court order? Linda stiffened. The HOA doesn't need a court order. I'm the president. The board approved action. The shorter officer shook his head. Ma'am, that's not how it works. Private property requires due process. You can't just tow without legal authority. Murmurs rippled through the crowd of neighbors. A few even nodded. For the first time, David saw doubt flicker in Linda's eyes. But she recovered quickly, her voice rising. You don't understand. If we let people like him get away with this, the neighborhood falls apart. This is about protecting everyone's investment. David's voice cut through hers. This is about you abusing power. She thinks the HOA makes her queen of this street. But the law doesn't answer to her clipboard. The taller officer studied both of them. His gaze lingered on the tow truck driver. Who called you? The driver pointed weakly at Linda. She did. She said she had authority. I didn't want trouble. The officer frowned, then looked back at Linda. You can't mislead contractors like this. This could be considered harassment, or worse. Linda's face flushed red. She opened her mouth to argue, but no words came. For the first time, she seemed cornered. David's chest loosened slightly. He felt the tide shift. The taller officer turned to him. Sir, you're within your rights to keep your car here. No law is being broken. David nodded firmly. Thank you, officer. The tow truck driver quickly climbed into his cab, muttering, I'm outta here, before pulling away. The chains clattered as the truck disappeared down the street. The neighbors whispered louder now, their phones still pointed at Linda. Some smirked. Some shook their heads. Linda's composure cracked. Her voice wavered, though she tried to sound strong. This isn't over. He's defying the HOA, and he will pay for it. The officer gave her a hard look. Ma'am, if you keep pushing without legal grounds, you'll be the one facing charges. David met Linda's glare across the flashing lights. For a moment, neither moved. Then, slowly, she turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the pavement. She disappeared into the shadows of her porch, leaving the crowd buzzing. David's wife came to his side, gripping his arm. "You did it," she whispered. David exhaled, shoulders heavy with exhaustion. For now, his car was safe. For now, the law had been on his side. But deep down, he knew Linda wouldn't stop. Not after being humiliated in front of neighbors, police, and her own board members. As the officers drove off and the crowd dispersed, David noticed something strange. A single envelope had been slipped under his windshield wiper during the chaos. He pulled it free, unfolding the paper under the streetlight. 7 words again, sharp and deliberate. Court is next. She never loses there. David's stomach dropped. Linda had lost the battle tonight. But the war was far from over. Chapter 6. The Court Papers. The neighborhood was quiet the next morning, but the silence didn't feel like peace. It felt like waiting. Watching. David stepped outside, coffee in hand, the cool air biting his skin. His car sat untouched in the driveway, sunlight glinting off the hood. He should have felt relief. Instead, his gut twisted with unease. Something was coming. He didn't have to wait long. A white envelope sat on his doorstep. Heavy paper, stamped with the HOA crest. His stomach dropped the moment he saw it. He tore it open with trembling fingers. Notice of legal action. The HOA v. David Miller. Hearing scheduled, 2 weeks. His hands tightened around the letter. The words blurred for a second as rage boiled inside him. "They're dragging me to court," he muttered. His wife appeared behind him, her robe pulled tight. "Court? Over what?" David shoved the letter into her hands. "She's not stopping. She's escalating." His wife read quickly, her face pale. "This isn't about the car anymore. She's trying to break us." David paced the porch, fists clenched. "She called the police, tried to tow my car, and failed. Now she wants a judge to do her dirty work." His wife whispered, almost to herself, "What if the board sides with her? What if the neighbors testify against us?" The thought hit David like a blow. He turned toward the street. Curtains fluttered shut. A man watering his lawn turned away quickly, pretending not to notice him. It wasn't just Linda. The whole neighborhood seemed complicit. Silent, but not innocent. That night, David sat at the kitchen table surrounded by papers. His car's registration, property deed, HOA bylaws he had downloaded online. He underlined, highlighted, searched for anything to prove Linda's claims were baseless. But as the clock ticked past midnight, his eyes burned and his chest grew heavy. He rubbed his temples. "She has power, but I have the truth. That has to count for something." A noise at the door broke his thoughts. A faint shuffle. David shot up, heart racing, and yanked the door open. The street was empty. Quiet. But when he looked down, his blood ran cold. Another envelope lay on the mat. Plain white, no seal this time. He picked it up slowly, tearing it open with shaky hands. Inside, a single sheet of paper. "Don't trust your neighbors." The letters were sharp, almost carved into the page. David's breath came fast. He spun, scanning the houses. Windows stared back at him, dark and lifeless. No movement. No faces. Just the weight of being watched. His wife's voice trembled from behind him. "What is it?" David showed her the note. She gasped, hand over her mouth. "Who would send that?" David shook his head. "Someone knows what's happening. Someone knows more than they're saying." For the first time, doubt pierced his anger. It wasn't just Linda he was fighting. There was something bigger, quieter, lurking under the surface of this neighborhood. He looked down at the 2 envelopes on the table, One stamped with the HOA crest, the other anonymous and cold. One was a declaration of war. The other a warning. But from who? David sat back, jaw tight, eyes burning with sleepless rage. She wants a court fight, he muttered. Fine. I'll see her there. And I'll tear her lies apart. But even as he spoke the words, he couldn't shake the image of that note. Don't trust your neighbors. What if the courtroom wasn't the only battlefield? What if the betrayal was already closer than he realized? Chapter 7. The Courtroom Clash. The courthouse smelled of paper and polish. David's footsteps echoed as he walked through the tall wooden doors, clutching a folder of documents like a lifeline. His wife stayed close, her eyes scanning the room nervously. At the far end, Linda sat with her clipboard, as if even court couldn't separate her from it. She wore a sharp blazer, her hair pulled tight, her expression smug. 2 HOA board members sat behind her, avoiding David's gaze. The judge entered and the room rose. The sound of the gavel brought a heavy silence. Case: the Homeowners Association versus David Miller, the clerk announced. David's heart thudded. The judge's eyes swept the room. Let's begin. Linda stood first, her voice smooth and commanding. Your Honor, this man has openly defied community rules. His vehicle violates standards, lowers property values, and disrupts the peace. He ignored warnings, refused to comply, and obstructed enforcement. Her words dripped with confidence, as if victory was already hers. The judge turned to David. Mr. Miller, your response? David rose, his hands trembling slightly as he held his folder. Your Honor, my car is legal. Registered. Parked on my property. The HOA bylaws don't forbid it. She made this up. She tried to tow it without a court order, called the police, and harassed me. He held up papers. Registration, deed, bylaws printed and highlighted. I have proof. Murmurs rippled through the small courtroom. The judge nodded. Evidence will be reviewed. Continue. Linda stepped forward again, her eyes flashing. He twists the story. He's hostile. Even the neighbors feel unsafe. She turned, gesturing to the 2 board members behind her. Tell them. The older man shifted uncomfortably, standing. His voice was quiet. We support the president. The car is not in line with community standards. David's jaw tightened. Standards? Or her opinion? The man faltered, glancing at Linda. He sat down without finishing. David stepped closer to the bench, voice firm. Your Honor, this is abuse of power. She thinks the HOA makes her above the law. But the law doesn't answer to her clipboard. The judge leaned back, studying Linda. Mrs. Green, do you have documentation proving this vehicle is a violation? Linda hesitated. For the first time, her confidence cracked. She shuffled through papers, flipping page after page. Nothing. David watched her hands shake. Finally, she slammed the clipboard shut. It's common sense. Look at it. It doesn't belong. The judge's voice was sharp. This is a court of law, not personal opinion. If you cannot provide legal grounds, this case collapses. Gasps and murmurs filled the room. David's wife squeezed his hand, hope flickering in her eyes. The judge leaned forward. My ruling will be given shortly. But I'll warn you, Mrs. Green, abuse of position within an HOA can have serious consequences. Linda's face flushed crimson. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Her fingers dug into the edges of her clipboard until her knuckles turned white. David sat back down, his chest rising and falling, adrenaline still surging. For the first time in weeks, he felt like the truth might finally win. The judge shuffled papers, preparing the final words. The room held its breath. Then, just as the gavel lifted, David felt something. A slip of paper against his leg. He looked down. An envelope had been slid onto his bench, unseen by the judge. Plain white. No seal. His blood ran cold as he opened it under the table. The car was only the beginning. David's heart pounded. He glanced around the room. The neighbors. The board. Linda. Anyone could have slipped it there. The judge's gavel came down. Final ruling will be issued tomorrow morning. Court adjourned. But David barely heard it. His eyes stayed locked on the note, the words burning into his mind. The battle wasn't over. It was only about to get darker. Chapter 8. The Final Blow. The morning air outside the courthouse felt heavy. Neighbors had gathered near the steps, whispering, watching. David walked up slowly, his wife beside him, the anonymous note still in his pocket. Inside, the judge returned to the bench with a folder in hand. Linda sat rigid, her eyes blazing, her clipboard clutched like a shield. The board members looked pale, like men already cornered. The gavel struck. "This court has reviewed the evidence," the judge began. "And it is clear. There is no legal violation here. Mr. Miller is within his rights." David's chest filled with relief. He closed his eyes for a second, letting the words sink in. But the judge wasn't finished. Furthermore, the court finds that Mrs. Green abused her authority as HOA president. A formal complaint will be forwarded to county officials. Possible removal from her position will be reviewed. Gasps spread through the room. David opened his eyes just in time to see Linda's face break. Red, trembling, furious. "You can't do this to me," she shouted, standing so quickly her chair toppled. "I run this neighborhood. Without me it falls apart." The judge's voice cut through her outburst. "You run nothing here. This is the law. Sit down." Two bailiffs stepped forward. Linda froze, her mouth opening and closing, then sat down hard, her hands shaking. David looked at her, a strange mix of triumph and unease washing through him. He had won. Or at least, it seemed that way. The gavel struck again. Case closed. The courtroom emptied in a swirl of whispers. Some neighbors looked at David with cautious smiles, others avoided his eyes. The board members slipped away quickly, as if afraid of what came next. David and his wife walked outside, sunlight striking their faces. For the first time in weeks, the weight felt lighter. Until he felt the paper in his pocket again. He pulled it out, staring at the words. The car was only the beginning. His wife frowned. "Who gave you that?" He shook his head. "I don't know. But someone wants me to believe this isn't over." Before she could answer, a voice came from behind. "You should listen." David spun. A man stood near the courthouse pillars. Mid-40s, plain suit, sunglasses hiding his eyes. He wasn't a neighbor. He didn't belong. "Who are you?" David demanded. The man stepped closer, his tone low and urgent. "Linda isn't your only problem. The HOA board, they're hiding something. She was their shield. Now she's gone, you'll see the truth." David's pulse quickened. "What truth?" The man slipped an envelope into David's hand. "Read this when you're home. And watch your back." Before David could ask another question, the man melted into the crowd, gone like smoke. David stared at the envelope. It was heavier than the last ones. He slid a finger under the flap and pulled out a single photograph. It showed his driveway at night, his car, his front door, and in the corner, two HOA board members caught mid-step, carrying tools. His stomach turned cold. "They were in our yard," his wife whispered, horrified. David's throat tightened. His neighbors hadn't just watched. They had acted. He folded the photo back into the envelope, his hand trembling. "This isn't finished," he muttered. The courthouse behind them stood tall and silent, but David knew the battle had only changed shape. The clipboard queen had fallen, but the board was still moving pieces in the shadows. And now, someone else was feeding him the truth. Friend or trap? David stared out across the crowd of neighbors, the envelope burning in his hand. For the first time, he understood. This wasn't about a car. It was about control. Power. Secrets buried under manicured lawns. And the war for his neighborhood had just begun. If you love watching my videos, then like and subscribe my channel.